Okay, so here we are with our daily fuel, and we are moving through the New Testament in a year. We're in Acts chapter 17. And Acts chapter 17 has the Apostle Paul in 3 different cities, starting some fellowships, witnessing, sharing Christ. In chapter 17, verses 1 through 9, we find him starting the church in Thessalonica. And it turns out that probably this church in Thessalonica, that the first letter in the New Testament that was written, the letter to the Thessalonians, was written to this church, this particular church. And so they had some problems, they had some issues. Paul was there, he was there for a few weeks, some persecution broke out, he left. He wrote them a letter, and the letter is called First Thessalonians. He also wrote Second Thessalonians. And in chapter 17, verses 10 through 15, another town, another city, Berea. And that brings us to chapter 17, verse 16. Paul is in Athens. And this is pretty significant because the Apostle Paul, he grows up in a religious environment. He grows up eating religious foods. He wears religious clothes. He went to religious schools. All of his friends were religious. He lives in a religious bubble, and it's that Jewish bubble, the bubble of the first century Judaism. And he's not really familiar with what's going on in these pagan practices. He may have heard of them, maybe even studied about some of them, but now he's going to see them. And he's going to see them in the center of where all of this stuff happens in the first century, Athens. Athens, the center of Greek Hellenistic culture. So while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, waiting for Timothy, waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see the city was full of idols. So maybe you've been to a city where you're there and you're sort of distressed of, what is this city? What are they doing here? What's going on? And so he's having that experience, that emotional experience, seeing that there's all of these people there and they're worshiping idols. They're not worshiping the true and the living God. They're not worshiping the God that made the heavens and the earth. They're not worshiping the God that still speaks to this day and still saves and still transforms. And he's bothered by it. And he's waiting for them, looking around, seeing what's going on. So in verse 17, it says, "So he reasoned in the synagogues with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day, those who happened to be there." So again, you have these God-fearers, these people who are aware of God. They have a God awareness. They may be convinced that God made the world, but they're not believers yet. And so Paul goes into the synagogues where he knows the Jews are there, who they've studied the scriptures their whole life, generationally. They have, dad and grandpa, great-grandpa, going all the way back. And so he would go to the Jew first and then to the Gentiles. But in some of these synagogues, there's some God-fearing Gentiles. So he goes in and he begins to teach from the scriptures that Jesus was the Christ. He goes into the marketplace and he's finding opportunities to talk to people in the marketplace. And so in verse 18, it says, "A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. And some asked, 'What's this babbler trying to say?' And others said, 'Well, he seems to be advocating foreign gods.'" Now, these are 2 different philosophies of life, the Epicurean life and the Stoic life. And the Stoic life would be a life of self-control, discipline. Of course, they're not necessarily believing in afterlife, or maybe even not believing in God, the creator, maker of heaven and earth, but they have a philosophy of life, and the Stoics would be, you lead a disciplined life, you lead a good life. And the Epicureans were kind of, well, I don't know. Let's just eat, drink, and be merry because tomorrow we die. So 2 different ways of looking at the world, 2 different ways of living. And I think you would say today in America, those 2 groups are probably pretty clear. People who think what you need to do is have a disciplined life, get a good education, work hard, work steady, always be good, always do the right thing. And people who are like, just, party and get all that you can, get every inch of life that you can get, and drain it and get every drop. And so they're both seeing him, and some are saying, well, I don't know what this guy is saying. Some are saying to just talking on and on and on. And others the same way. He's talking about other gods. I'd be interested in that. And they said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Preaching the gospel and talking about the resurrection, talking about Jesus who came to die, and then the resurrection. So this is sort of intriguing. And then they took him and they brought him to the meeting place of the Areopagus, which was a hill where people gathered, where they said to him, may we know what this new teaching is that you're presenting. Tell us what's going on. We want to hear it. You're bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we'd like to know what they mean. And then Luke inserts this. He says, all of the Athenians and foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking and listening to the latest ideas. Just passing their days and passing their life with just talking about the newest things. And Paul comes into town and has got this novel idea about a God who created the heavens and the earth, sent his son, his only son, sent God himself onto the planet, and God dies and resurrects from the dead. They want to hear about it. Paul stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, people of Athens, I see that in every way you're very religious. You seem to be worshiping something. For I walked around and I looked carefully at objects of worship. I even found an altar that said to the unknown God. We don't know who he is or what he does. And so you are ignorant of the very thing you worship, and this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. So you don't know who that unknown God is, but I'm going to tell you who that unknown God is. I'm going to explain it to you. And he said, the God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and he doesn't live in temples built by human hands. There's a lot of temples in town. And he's saying that God doesn't live in those temples. He doesn't dwell in those temples. He's the creator. He's the maker of heaven and earth. So I'm going to tell you about the maker, the creator of heaven and earth. And he doesn't live in one of these temples. You can't confine him. And he's not served by human hands as if he needed everything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything we have. So what can you bring him? What can you bring God, the creator, the maker of heaven and earth? Because he even gives you life and breath. If you have any breath, it's because God is giving it to you. Now, this is a pretty important verse right here. Maybe we'll just camp here and not move on much further. Verse 26, chapter 17. For from one man he made all nations that they should inhabit the earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their hands. From one person, one blood. This is very important because all of humanity shares the same blood. We all come from the same place. Some years ago, PBS had done a special on race, because race was such a big issue in the United States. They were trying to sort through it, what's going on, why is there racism, why do people feel this way? And they came to the conclusion, using DNA, that we all come from the same place. We all share the same DNA. They brought it all the way back to what they saw as sort of the mythical Eve. And that's kind of what they called it, that we all have this sort of common mother, Eve. And she's a mythical Eve. Well, why can't she be the Bible Eve? That we've all come from the same place. We are all brothers and sisters. We are all created. And they ultimately, when they were looking to discover, what's race and how does it play into social interaction and all of those things, they came to the conclusion that there is no such thing as race, that race is just a myth. There is no race. Now, there's different people, there's different ethnic groups, there's different physical traits that groups of people have, but there's only one race, and it's the human race. It's who God created in the garden. He created us, and we all come from the same place. We all come from the same common ancestor. And so, yes, we are brothers and sisters with everybody else on the planet. This is huge. And the Apostle Paul saying this is huge. And he said God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out and find him, though he's not far from them, because watch this. For in him we live and move and have our being, as some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we're God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is made of gold or silver or stone or an image made by human hands or designed. In the past, God overlooked this kind of stuff. But now he's calling all of people to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world in the justice by man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising Jesus from the dead. When they heard the resurrection of the dead, some snared, but others said, we want to hear more about this. We want to hear more on this subject. And at that, Paul left the council, and some of the people became followers of Paul and believed. Among them was Diogenes, a member of the Areopagus, and a woman named Damaris, and a number of other people. We have all come from the same place. Racism is a myth. There's only one race, the human race, and we are all part of it. So bless you guys. Love you. There's lots of implications there, lots of societal implications, lots of personal applications, lots of applications of what's going on in the world at this very moment. So bless you guys. Love you. Let's keep moving through the book of Acts.